For many of us in the room today, struggling to feed 9 billion people is a reality we could be living in. Highlighting the creative solutions to this problem involves an exchange of ideas between different actors from the private and public sectors. This summit is a part of that effort. And one of the people who has been on the forefront before it was cool is Dr. Jason Clay, World Wildlife Fund's Senior Vice President of Market Transformation. If we are to bring about changes in what and how we consume, there needs to be dialogue. Dr. Clay has led efforts to bridge the gap between the market and the protection of our natural resources. To use his words, on a finite planet, sustainability is pre-competitive. We have to work together. He's ran a farm, taught at Harvard and Yale, worked at the US Department of Agriculture, and spent more than 25 years working with human rights and environmental organizations before joining WWF in 1999. Dr. Clay has also helped create Ben & Jerry's Rainforest Crunch ice cream flavor. It is with great admiration and pleasure I welcome Dr. Jason Clay.
Thank you. So I'm not actually 100 years old. So why is somebody from WWF here talking to you today about food and global food systems? It's actually pretty simple. We've come to realize that if we don't get where and how we produce food right, we can turn out the lights and go home. There won't be a planet as we know it. So we've got to get food production moving in a more sustainable direction. We don't buy or sell anything. We don't make laws or regulations. And 15,000 projects, no matter how well they're done and well managed, are not going to save this planet. We've got to change the way we work. We need to shift from doing and managing to influencing and leveraging, to change the actions of others. And to do that, we've got to build awareness, we've got to build consensus, and then we've got to develop strategies to move the ball forward, to move the needle. And here's why. Let me see if I can run this. In the next 40 years, we have to produce as much food as we have in the last 8,000. Same land, same planet, same water. A lot of people, especially in the US and Europe, talk about population. The problem is population. In the next 40 years, population is going to grow between 25 and 30%. Population actually isn't the big issue. The issue is income, which is going to go up by 190%, and consumption, which is going to double per capita. Those are the issues we have to deal with. And I think we've got to understand what the speed of change is on the planet today, or the speed of life, as I like to call it. It took Britain 155 years to double the per capita income of 9 million people during the Industrial Revolution. It took China 12 years to double the per capita income of 1 billion people. It's 12 times the speed and 100 times the scope or the scale. China lifted 400 million people above the poverty line in that period. And that's a fantastic thing. And they brought another 200 to 250 million people out of poverty since then. Now, these are not middle class, as some people like to say, but they are certainly not below the poverty line. That's fantastic. That's what all of our development programs are aimed to do. But the implications of that are phenomenal, not just for food and food consumption, but for the planet and how we produce that food. These are the countries during the global recession, 2010, 2011, that were growing at 5% or more, 100 countries. Half of them growing at 7% or more. This is 60% of the world's population. Where's the global recession? Not in these countries. These are the ones where China is the main trading partner. Where's the US and Europe? Where's the influence? If you want to see one chart that talks about, that at least explains why I'm here, it's this one. In the last 23 years, 100 countries have taken land out of protection to use the resources. They've either downgraded it, eliminated parks entirely, etc. That's a trend we do not want to see. We don't want to see expansion of agricultural production. Agricultural sprawl is a bigger threat to the planet than urban sprawl. We need to be very thoughtful about that. We need to do more with less. We're going to have to intensify production. We're going to have to make agriculture more efficient if we're going to produce more and not have greater impacts than we already do. We're going to also have to shift our thinking from maximizing any one thing, whether it's water, carbon, soil, production, greenhouse gas emissions, etc., to optimizing many things, but not too many things, not 100 things, not 20 things, maybe 6 or 8 things. How can we optimize our use of resources on this planet? As I like to say, the issue isn't what to think, it's how to think. For students in college today, 80% of what you learn will be irrelevant by the time you graduate. So if you don't understand how to think, you're going to miss the boat. We've got to build consensus around issues, how to think around that consensus, and how to be strategic. We had a previous discussion about climate change. Here's another little aspect of climate change. Today, with globalization and trade, 8 countries represent 85 to 90% of all the cereal grain exports. Those same 8 countries represent 65 to 70% of all the oil seed exports. They don't produce the basic food for different countries. They filled the gaps when there are gaps because of political chaos, because of climate conditions, etc. But in 2012, these 4 countries had drought, and that affected how much they were able to put in the world's market. We're becoming dependent on countries that are being affected by weather variability, which is the new euphemism for climate change. 9 billion people, roughly twice as much food. We can quibble about that, but if you throw in feed and fuel and bioplastics, etc., we're still talking about twice as much production in all. We're currently using about 40% of the land on the planet for producing food and fiber. Are we going to double that? That's the business as usual model. That's 80% of the planet for food. Now, we don't even have 80% that we could use if you take out mountains and lakes and rivers and streams and deserts. We're not going to get there. So that's not going to be possible. We got to freeze the footprint of food. That doesn't mean we freeze production. In fact, just the opposite. We need to increase productivity. We need to increase efficiency. We need to use every resource better, not just one like land. How are we going to do this? There's no silver bullet, but these 9 strategies, these food wedges as we've called them, actually would allow us to more than double, triple, or even quadruple food production if we pursued all of them with vigor. But we've only got about 37 years before 2050 to do this, and if we don't get started soon, we're going to be in trouble. And it's not just about productivity, although that's a big piece of it. It's also about waste. It's also about consumption. It's also about distribution. So these are issues that we have to focus on, not just one, not just maximizing one, but looking at how to optimize several. Today we waste 1 in 3 calories. About 40% is the estimate. True in developing countries, true in developed countries. What that means is that food waste represents 10% of greenhouse gas emissions on the planet. 23% of all the water used by people on the planet is food waste. We're wasting our resources to produce food that's not even being consumed. We need to understand the synergies. Without genetics, we would be hunters and gatherers. We wouldn't have buildings like this. We wouldn't have urbanization. We wouldn't have cities. So let's get over it. We got to use genetics. What we're going to use is going to vary in different countries and get different cultures. But we've got to leave genetics on the table. Even hybrids quadrupled corn production in the US. Not GMOs, hybrids. Most of these hybrids are not produced anywhere else in the world. We focus a lot on corn. The number of calories, and again, calories aren't nutrition, but they're part of it. Bananas in Costa Rica, on average, produce 20 times more calories per acre than corn in Iowa. Sugar in Brazil produces 60 times more calories than corn in Iowa. We need to focus on crops that produce more calories, and I say if we're going to modify them, let's put nutrients in the crops that are the most productive so that we get a bang for the buck. And let's focus on the crops that are grown today in the places where the populations are going to increase the most and where income is going to increase the most. These are some of the crops that are important in Africa. We need to focus on them. We use 70% of the water today that's used by people for agriculture. It takes about 1 liter of water to make 1 calorie of food. We're going to have to do 2 calories with half a liter if we want to get back in line with this planet. Better practices that farmers use regularly are 100 times better than worse practices. Which gives us more food? Working with the best, recognizing the best, or moving the rest? Most of the voluntary programs for certification and standards focus on the right-hand side. They look at what the best producers are doing. The bottom 25% of the producers produce 50% of the impacts and 10% of the production, on average for any crop. We get more bang for the buck by focusing on the worst farmers, not the best. We need to shift to the worst farmers. We need to work with them, help them be better, or help them get out and find another way to make a living. The biggest cause of deforestation on the planet today is the expansion of agriculture. Why don't we turn the ag frontier on itself and start rehabilitating degraded land? We've got a project with the World Bank to focus on rehabilitating 250 million hectares of land. We can produce 10% of the world's calories on that land. On a finite planet, the question becomes, should consumers have a choice about sustainability? Or should all the products on the shelf be sustainable? Our position is that they should all be sustainable. So how do we move sustainability from niche to norm? How do we make it the norm? Organic, after 40 years globally, is less than 1% of global production. That's simply not a viable model. It's not moving fast enough. I want to talk about what 4 different entities are doing. Unilever, as a company, is the first company to declare that 100% of their 3,300 bio-based raw materials will be certified sustainable by 2020. This group of 18 companies, the Consumer Goods Forum, made a commitment to take deforestation out of their supply chains. Today, 57 companies have signed up. This is between $20 and $25 billion worth of purchases. It's 4 crops, and it's 3 countries. The Salmon Aquaculture Initiative, 15 CEOs of producing companies have agreed that by 2020, they will be certified as sustainable. That's 70% of global salmon production. They're going to do it by sharing their data about how to get better faster. They're creating an open source database to actually share information. Pre-competitive. Ireland is the first country that has made a commitment that 100% of its food exports will be certified third party as sustainable by 2016. 25% already are. No other country has done that. Why are these companies doing this? In 1975, the value of a company was in tangible assets. By 2009, the value of a company was in intangible assets. And what that means is that the brand, the risk, are more important to companies now than ever before. They can take out an insurance policy on a factory. What do you take out as an insurance policy on your brand or your reputation. We think certification and third-party certification is one way to do that. So there are a lot of illegal products that also pose brand risks. A third of all the fish sold in the US is illegal. It's 50% of grouper and red snapper aren't even genetically grouper or red snapper. These are risks. So there's a saying where I come from, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. We need to figure out what we can do to move the needle. No one can do everything. Everyone can do something. What are you going to do? Think about it. Thank you very much.